Hi, Tim Taylor. I sit in the Intelligent Cloud and Infrastructure Division at Accenture. What I'm going to do is take you through a little bit of some of the trends we're seeing in banking today, and then try and map that through a little bit into how we're approaching clients, how we're helping clients, and some of the journeys that we're going on. You're all aware of what's happening in the market. I'm not going to explain too much about the market. I think there's these two things that come out this week on Monday are absolute peaches about what's going to come forward. 1.5 million jobs at high risk of automation. I think you could just put that into IT. Forget all the manufacturing and all of those pieces, and I think it's probably out by a factor of 10. That's my personal, that's not an Accenture view at this point. But I think the level of automation that's coming is absolutely unreal, and we don't know about it yet and what's going to happen. We talked about Apple Card already, about how they're tracking it into the iPhone. We saw Apple Pay, that your iPhone becomes a credit card. We've now got it coming as a bank. And I think it's the changes which are coming on those sides and from people like Apple, which are going to fundamentally change the whole way that we do banking. And it's not just business to consumer. I think it's going to come business to business as well. So what I'm going to do is just take you through 10 trends, just very high level, and none of them are great shocks, but what it is just to make you think a little bit about what's coming on. We talked about open banking. 10 years ago, I think there's about, let's be surprised, there's a total of 1,000 APIs. Now you've got about 1,000 APIs coming a week. So the pace of change coming here is unreal. I think this is the new internet. I think if you can open access to the data and people start to get ways of using that data, then it's fundamentally a complete change. I've been in several banks. I've been in trying to put the API gateways into public cloud, having the conversation with several of the banks. A year ago, absolute panic and fear. Going back to the first presentation, this is where you should be looking about how can you extract the data to fundamentally change the way that you operate with your clients. Public cloud. There is no reason from a regulatory point of view or from an internal point of view that public cloud is not going to come mainstream. I think this year I'm really seeing clients pushing from main boards to go from 10%, most of the banks are at the moment, probably going to closer to 50, 60, 70. That's all going to flip in the next couple of years. Just because the costs have got so high, the capex have got so high, the ability to change is fundamentally limited by the data center now. If you think about what we're trying to do, all the big organizations are trying to become Netflix. We all want to be able to change code in sort of 30 seconds or something like that. We'd be lucky to get a production release out every month at the moment. That's got to come down to weeks, days, and hours, and that's what it's all about. We do not know the future. I hate to say it, it's a bit like Brexit. I've got a French wife trying to explain this at the moment. It's a complete nightmare. What we've got to do is prepare for change. We don't know what's coming. We've got to put our hands up and say we don't know. If you ask the main boards or what's going to happen about Brexit, guess what? None of them are going to know at this point because I don't think anybody does. But it comes down to what's going to happen in the future. And to be honest, we don't know. And we've got to be able to rapidly change that amount of code internally to be able to do. It's like doing the startups. The startups don't know what the future is. They're not absolutely locked down. What they're able to do is change and change fast, and that's what the big organizations need to do. Digital decoupling. The reason why I'm laughing, I was in a meeting with the CIO last week, and he affectionately called it, it's brilliant. I've done all the digital. There's lots and lots of bright people in all of the banks. One advantage of being in the banks, they can pay high wages, they can get the best in the organizations, they can get the best in the industry. But digital decoupling was affectionately called by him, and apologies if I offend anybody, if anybody from IBM here, hopefully not. But he called it putting the digital lipstick on the mainframe pig. So all the core systems are all around the mainframe. What they've done is wrapped all the mobile and the applications and the digital all the way around the mainframe, but fundamentally it's still getting the data out the mainframe and it's taking too long, too expensive to redo it. Now there is a fundamental problem there that we've done recoding, trying to replatform a mainframe is horribly expensive. Trying to move and change the code is extremely difficult. There is no simple answer to changing those core systems. Trying to build out new, we've seen clients trying to build out completely new greenfield within organizations is hard. Trying to replatform the code off is extremely hard. There is no simple question to that. What most people are doing, are trying to do digital decoupling, which is what they're taking something like a MongoDB database and taking it off the mainframe, taking the reads off the mainframe. It's what many of the big banks are doing already, but it's how do you actually fundamentally change the way that you do your old core IT operations. It's got to come cheaper, it's got to come faster. We talked a lot about digital origination. I don't need to tell you that the first presentation explained it beautifully. We've moved from paper-based statements to online statements to mobile statements. Even the Apple Pay is still real time. It's made it faster, but it's not fundamentally changed it. They give you 2% cash back or 3% if you buy Apple products. It won't be long before they start putting in Apple Music for free, and you can see how they're going to change it away from what the original banks do to some of their other products. If you look at some of the Virgin cards and stuff like that, there's been a massive ramp up in Virgin cards. What do? They put Virgin Miles with it. Guess what? The number of card people that took it up massively grew. Oh. Digital fraud. Let's be honest, and this is in a closed room. Nobody's safe. If a national sponsored attack comes in at you, give it time, they will come through. There is nothing we can do to protect ourselves fully from digital attacks. We are lucky that we get a lot of insight into places. I've seen clients have to throw away a whole data center's worth, 10,000 square foot worth of equipment. The sophistication of the computers, you've seen, you got your iPhones, you got your laptops, you got your other machines that make it so powerful what we have locally now. Even, let's just take a NetApp filer. I mean, just in the top of there is a massive computer, really complicated, lots of cache. The way that people can hide the sophistication of the attacks now is unbelievable. So what people are having to do to try and absolutely eradicate once they've been breached and they got inside, networks are fairly flat, just trying to do that. And the way that we've done networking in the past is everybody's allowed to access anything. That has fundamentally got to be shifted. Everything gets locked down now, and that's going to be a fundamental change to the way we go forward. I've had massive fun with CISOs trying to explain to them that public cloud is actually safer to them than their internal data center. And it takes about 2 years of coaching. So what they say, I'm going to public cloud, great. I'm going to public cloud, but you've got no internet access gateways. I'm going to treat it exactly the same as my legacy data center and actually backhaul all my traffic back to my original internet access gateways. I don't trust the private cloud. The fact that their compliance and everything else like that is so much more advanced. The number of people they've got protecting the Azure and the AWS data centers is much greater than anybody can do from your own internal security teams. It just takes a little bit of education. Accenture now, we've even got to the point that we're starting to have our own CISO school, so we can actually train the CISO for the future because things and the models are changing so much as we're going forward. Bless you. Digital first means fewer branches. I think we've all seen that. You're not going to have an Apple Bank. The whole movement, if you see Atom, if you see any of the new guys that are coming out, they reckon they're going to max out about 200 branches or something like that compared to the 1,500 that a lot of the other mainstream vendors have. What it is, what we haven't done, as explained in the other presentations, we haven't got to the data to analyze the data in order to do the personal service. I don't know anybody in my bank. I haven't been into a branch probably for 6 months. I probably haven't even pulled any cash out for the last, I don't know, 2-3 weeks, something in that sort of region. I don't use cash very much anymore. Perhaps when I go home and see my parents or something like that, you come out of London and away from the major cities, but even then, you can pretty much use your cards, use contactless and stuff like that. You don't actually need to carry cash around with you. So it just means that the whole ethos is changing. And this comes down to what we need to do is start to map back to our clients. We're all very good at technology, and don't question the capability of anybody in this room. What we've lost, though, is probably the relationship back with our clients, and that's what we need to come out with. We come so much looking at the feeds and speeds of what we do of the technology, we've lost where the client's going. What does the customer need? What does the customer want? How can I take the technology and translate it into what the customer wants?
Just ask the question there.
Yep.
What is a branch, and what services will be offered on a branch is actually needed at all? At the end of the day, customer intimacy is not going to come through a branch.
No.
What are you going to offer a customer to make them come into a branch? Why is a branch actually needed in the future at all?
They're going to become coffee shops.
Question.
Yeah, if you look at it now, they're starting to become coffee shops. Pardon?
You're not going to a branch for information or any kind of guidance about your cash, because banks don't give you that anymore.
And that's what's got to come back.
So why bother with branches in the future?
It's still a generational thing. If I go to my parents, if I go, my grandparents are no longer here, but it's the generational that probably in 30, maybe less, 20 years, we don't need branches at all, because people are very happy using mobile banking. I don't even think telephone banking is really useful anymore. Internet systems are now so strong that you don't need them. And I think it's a comfort blanket for some of the older people, and guess what? They're actually very cash rich. They're the people who had the final salary pensions, and guess what? They're all doing very nicely. So it's those segment of the population, that's what the branches are staying open for the moment. But in the next 10, 15, 20 years, branches can all go away.
Well, a retail bank, 2/3 of all the costs is the branch network and the people.
Agreed.
So it's a big problem for them. Keep open all the branches, keep 2/3 of the cost bit.
And I think the branch closure is just going to continue on and on and on, especially as they need to transform. If they took the money that they had in the branches and transformed that into getting to know their customers, offering new services actually out to their clients, I don't know, shut down the branches and go to them and actually say, if I shut down the branches, I can give each one of you £1,000 a year. Flip it on its head completely. What's everybody going to vote for? Shut them down. I don't need it. I'll take the extra £1,000. Nobody's quite been brave enough yet to actually fundamentally shift it and turn it on its head, but I think it's coming. We talked about the Fintechs. Things are changing. It's still in what we're doing is speeding things up at the moment. We're not fundamentally changing the whole market. We just stitched 15 different Fintechs together. I can do mortgage processing in 24 hours. Forget waiting weeks. You've got blockchain to be able to do the whole, to deal with the whole legal process. You can absolutely push this whole thing through. You can digitize it, but it's not fundamentally changing the process. It's just making it a lot faster. But that can be done. We're starting to see people go onto that. We're seeing the online mortgages. We're seeing those mortgage-only customers. Again, I have no relationship with my mortgage company. I just get a statement every year. I don't particularly care who I use. I'll just use who's got the best rates at the point. I'll change it every 5 years or something like that. So again, it's coming into the mortgage is going to go. You're starting to see it on Compare the Market and stuff like that. That area has become massively commoditized, and that's a massive financial impact onto people and the way that everybody does it. Just talking about regulatory relief. When was it? 2014. I put the first PRA FCA regulated workload on AWS here in the UK. It was comedy dealing with the regulators. Even the internal understanding of what the regulators want. So I had to put regulator audit rights into the AWS contract to allow the regulator, if they believe regulatory breach is going to happen, to be actually turn up to the AWS data center and have a look around. They wouldn't be able to do anything. Anybody in here that's from the technical side, great, you're going to see lots of flashing lights. Can't tell you where the data is. It's spread across the 10,000 servers that are in there. But you've got the right, got tick in the box, move forward. And this is the whole point, that as we're going through this transformation, and it comes back to the first presentation, even if you go to the risk and audit committees in your own organisations, they don't understand IT one iota. And they are brilliant business people, without question. But there's got to be, we're at a tipping point on the seesaw, there's got to be a digital understanding. A lot of these, if you think about your business today, they cannot work without IT. Whether IT is outsourced, whether it's insourced, I don't care about the models. But fundamentally, we are technology companies. And unless you've got people all the way through the organisation that understands technology, then things are going to be very, very slow to change, which is what we're seeing as we go through.
So who's educating the regulators? Because, you know, it's speaking to a customer not long ago, and they've changed, they're trying things differently,
Yep.
they're trying to speed up operations, they're doing different things, which means a different way of working.
Yep.
And part of the problem for their internal process was, whilst they can decrease the time to do things dramatically, you still get the internal auditors go, but if you want to do that, you need someone physically to come and do this. Is that
Correct.
right? The model technically is different. So who's educating?
So it's not actually the regulators. If you see the FCA, what they're doing now, they're going to be out onto public cloud fully within the next, pretty much there, so they'll be finished in the next 2 years. So they've gone. Okay, so all of the internal FSA data centers go to public cloud. What the issue is about internal understanding in the organisations from the internal auditors. I've had massive fights with them, and it's 6 months of pain to go through, backwards and forwards, understanding lawyers, auditors, and it's just going to take time for them to be able to understand. This is what the benefits are of some of the fintechs, because they've got people who are savvy in that straight away, and they get it, and they can say, yeah, you can do that, you can do that, you can do that, here's the regulation, and pass it straight through. What we have to do is bring people that have been in those roles 5, 10, 15 years, and actually bring them up to speed of what the internet's capable of doing. Here's all the compliances that are actually open from people like on Azure. Actually, my compliance is a lot simpler on public cloud. Yeah, because here's all the things. You can go and check. You can go off to Seattle. You can actually go through and tick them off, and if you want to go through a tick list. But that's starting to become, that was as of 2, 3, 5 years ago, but people now say, actually, I believe it, and moving forward. It's just going to take time to come through.
I guess following on from Steve's question, right, who's educating the regulators? Who's educating the banks? You know, you still find CIOs don't report, they don't sit on an executive committee. Worst case, they report to either a CFO or the same person that looks after Post-its and coffee.
Yeah.
And capabilities are not going to come up through an org when you get 2 seconds in a board meeting.
It's I'm seeing this from 2 different camps at the moment, which is most amusing for me. I'm working with one client that I'm working with the group COO, group CIO, head of global operations. So they run all the data centers and everything below on a global operation. And then the segments have their own internal CIOs who then report up to the segment CIO, who then reports to the CEO. They've also got a dotted line, or those segment CIOs also got a dotted line to the global CIO. And this is the whole point. The matrix in the big organizations are really hard, because if you're the group CIO, you've got to go to each one of the segment CIOs, because they actually pay for your money, they pay for your IT, whether it's done off utility basis, whether it's done off just a carve up of the total budget, you just divide it to the 4 segments. But then they're running too slow, and the segment CIOs going, you're not giving me enough bespoke service. I want to use cloud, I want to consume, I want to pay for what I use. You're too slow, I can't change my code fast enough, can't change my apps fast enough. So you've got that piece. But then I'm also working with a segment CIO where they're starting to be forced by the group around compliance, security, and all of that. And I think there's a massive change in the way that everybody's working. There is no perfect model. And you've got to try and get those blends right, because each of the individual segments are individual companies in their own right. And by economies of scale, can you then drive that through? So I think there is a massive change in the organisation. Technology can do it all. The technology is there. It's about the way you get change going through that organisation.
But to ask, because it's a different topic than the trend data you're mentioning, but this is saying that America, because of the regulatory relief, actually gives the banks their competitive advantage versus European banks. And you can
Correct.
You can see that in the balance sheet
absolutely.
of the market cap of European banks versus US. It was like equal 10 years ago, and now it's like this.
Absolutely. So what I think that we need to change fundamentally here, and it's starting. Will it start to come? It'll be interesting to see what happens on the politics. As the politics, do we stay, do we go, and what happens on the regulation when you're coming out of Europe and stuff like that. It wouldn't change much for the UK to actually go forward and actually start to compete. Something's got to happen. It's got to break, because we're at the point with the regulators that the whole point of where we're trying to go, where we're trying to move, is getting held back by some of the regulation. The regulation needs to stop from being audits and stuff like that to turning into real-time information. The regulators need to come actually into the data centers, into the banks, not from an audit point of view and just asking constantly for data, but to have real-time feeds and stuff like that. More like a Bloomberg type feed of getting real-time information. That should be pushed the other way of being able to go to the regulators. But they're not there yet. Artificial intelligence, we started on that, and I'll come back to it in the middle. We've got to get a lot smarter about how do we know our clients. I'll come on to that as we go into the next area, into the next slide, because it'll explain it a little bit more. Last point is monetizing data. We got massive data. Loads of clients got loads of data. People are trying to delete data now that's 7 years old. There's lots of data on NetApp filers and all the rest of it. And to be honest, there's too much data out there. We need to get rid of a lot of data. We need to understand where's the value in that data, and also try and work out what's core, what stays in the core data centers, what's that core set of data that if I got breached, if everything got deleted, what do I rebuild my bank from? And I'm not seeing that sort of move come yet, but that's going to come. And then that ability to move data, they talked about the data fabric before, but that ability to move my data on-premise, off-premise, when I've got all the SaaS services and everything else like that, there's so much data that's just getting proliferated around the organization that I don't think the data custodians are really struggling to actually get hold of that. And I think as that becomes more valuable, as people start to realize that, then that is massively going to change going forward. And I think the next massive wave is going to come around putting value to that data. GDPR started, but actually GDPR hurts it because actually it's locked away, so you can't actually understand what's in there. So as we start to do data in transit, locking down, data at rest, locking it down, somehow we need to be able to get inside of those data vaults and understand what's in there and understanding the value of that. So how does this all come together? What we're starting to do and what we're starting to talk about when we see a lot of the boards and stuff like that is IT costs too much. There's nobody out there that can see IT's great value. What we've got to simply do, I've tried to do it infrastructure coming up, it doesn't work. So we've got to come at it from top down. You've got to simplify the apps. 5,000 apps, somebody mentioned earlier, not unusual in many organizations. Even small organizations are pumping 3,000 apps. We've got to get rid of the apps. Once you start cutting down the apps, it cuts down the infrastructure, it cuts down your operating costs. It's easier to do automation, security is much tighter, and then you can start to do the spend optimization. Realistically, we're looking at customers to take 25 to 30% of the IT costs out. But it's not, IT can't do it on its own, okay? What we've also got to do is use the AI, so use the artificial intelligence to cut down your digital operations. Call it digital operations, back office, it's automating the people. It comes back to the ONS piece that a lot more automation's got to come in to the front office. If you look at the total spend of IT, it's somewhere between 5 to 10% of the total spend of the organization. Still, there's 95% of the cost that comes in here. Again, got to be looking at 30 to 35% reduction of the cost here. And that's done through AI. It's not just done by offshoring and BPO type work, but it's about automating the whole process. If you automate, you get faster, you get better data, and that's how you start to cut the cost out. What that then means is you can focus on this piece over here, which is all about what drives up the value for you. So all we got here, I'll give you one example where we put this in. This was done with an insurer, and actually what we did is worked with them. It was a big data analytics piece that was done on Google, and actually what we were able to do is work with the insurer, and it was about how they're losing clients. So before the policy comes up, so say I've got my motor insurance, I've just renewed it, but it was just coming up last month. If they called me 4 weeks before, what this customer did is call all the clients who were just about to renew 4 weeks before and said, your policy's coming up. Before you go on to compare the market and stuff like that, which you'll find something potentially similar to what you're paying today, maybe tens of pounds cheaper. What we're able to do actually, if you make these changes to your policy, if you add your wife, if you're not doing 10,000 miles anymore, you're doing 8,000 miles, actually I can change the risk profile from the people internally, and actually I can reduce your policy. So I can actually go to you proactively and say, I can reduce your policy from £500 a month, and now it's only £410. Client's very happy, they renew, And actually, they saw massive uptake in just their car insurance. But what actually happened is the clients then called back and said, my life insurance is coming up, my household insurance, my pet insurance. And so what they started to do is get this 360-degree view of the client and actually get the insurance team to go proactively to the client. So this is where you're starting to bring the big data together. This is where you're bringing the AI together to get that complete view of the client in order to make changes to them that matter to them. They want to pay less, but they want to keep the same cover. We're seeing things such as European car insurance getting thrown in for free, so you don't need to call up if you're going on holiday and stuff like that. It's making small changes that make a massive difference to the clients. Applied intelligence, but it's then trying to map that through our organisations, coming up to how can we do something which is actually a value proposition out to the businesses. So this is just going to our internal stakeholders. How can we make an IT change down here, which then changes the value proposition to our clients? What that does to the stakeholders, obviously grow revenue, increase efficiency, capital return, security, trust, and those pieces. But it's how do you map the ecosystem that we live in the current world to actually make a difference. It's about differentiating that customer experience. It's talked about in the first presentation. It's fundamentally changing the way that we operate. It's extremely hard to do. We're just starting to get the understanding of how do we do this. We haven't got it perfect, but what we're trying to do is map all these changes in technology, map it with cloud, map it with everything that's going on, all the fintechs or the insurtechs, back to what stakeholders want. Guess what? The shareholders always want revenues up, costs down, and to be able to change that, come out with the innovation, but also using how do we get this back and make it a massive difference to our clients. And it's really, really hard to do. But this is what we're trying to map out at the moment, is how do you differentiate that client experience. This is where some of the DevOps comes into it. This is where rather than going for a big billion-dollar outsource project or $1 billion investment into a project, you're going for small sprints. You're asking for the 100,000. You're asking for the million. You're proving it as you're going. You're going into short sprints. You're not doing that waterfall type, right, I want the $1 billion. You're going out, you're proving something. Once it's proven, okay, then you get the next hurdle, then you get the next amount of money. So you're having to do it off actuals or something achieved. So many of these big projects go into a cycle that just disappears into a black hole. Everybody's excited for the first 6 months, then it's another 6 months of black hole, and then eventually it should pop out at the end. It doesn't work like that anymore. With DevOps and the sprint teams and stuff like that, if you've got really good application guys, you can actually do lots of little sprints. You can get the infrastructure guys coming along with you. You can do it onto public cloud. You can start to change that, but you've got to keep that goal in mind, not to get lost in the feeds and speeds and the features of what you're doing, keeping a view of how do you actually make a change to the client. Because if you can make a small change to the clients will come with you. The clients want that change.
How does that then apply at something like an infrastructure layer? NetApp's not an infrastructure company anymore, I get it.
Correct.
But there's still, for us to provide a capability to all of our customers that allows them to develop software faster,
yep,
or operate an IT infrastructure an awful lot more slickly,
correct,
that still takes big iron on the floor sooner or later. You know, there's an investment around either putting kit in a data center or making a big operational change that may pay off in the future.
Correct.
How do we sell that?
So the way that I've done it, I think Connor's speaking later, so Connor and I worked together for the last 2 years. What we actually did is we put 4 private clouds into a client, 2 in the UK, 2 in the US, and then what we've done is gone full automation. So we've taken the flex pods, and what we've done is actually gone working with the client and all the automation teams. He's literally gone from CI/CD all the way through, so being able to change all the apps and real time flow that all the way through the infrastructure. The infrastructure's got to get agile. If you're struggling to spin up servers immediately, if it takes a month at the moment, it's too long. They've got to be done in 15 minutes or less. You've got to be able to spin stuff up rapidly and then shut it down. And the same premise of what you got internally, you've got to be able to do on the public cloud. It's the same operating model. Everything that you can do on the public cloud, yes, there's a lot more features when you come to PaaS and SaaS and stuff like that, but the IS layer, then the op model effectively comes the same. And the way that we did this with the model with this client is actually, we did a bit of self-funding. They had a NetApp estate. What we did, we then, a lot of that had the latest solid-state drives and stuff like that. We were able to change the finance from 5 years to 7 years, which helped us with some of the cash flow to then make investments in how do we take it to the future. So it's about changing some of the Finance rules. If everything's solid state, we've all seen it with our laptops, we're suddenly on solid state drives, they don't actually wear out so quickly. So actually you can start to do that with some of the finance guys. That frees up a lot of money. That means you can make the investment and actually start to do the business cases. We've also started to move some of the, using some of the NetApp tools, we can actually use the data. I don't care whether the data is on premise or in the cloud. I can actually use some of the NetApp tools to actually flip it out and bring it back again. So that's been a massive change. And being able to hold on to what's your core data center, understanding what's your core data, where's the value of that data. 9 times out of 10, people still love to hug it and hold it and keep it local. So that's been a massive change as people have moved forward. The other piece is moving some of the old bits. So iron mounting, why do you need iron mounting? Great. Try and recover off a tape that's 10 years old, absolutely useless. Who's got any LTO one drives in their organization? You're going to trust that all your accounts information is going to come back off that? Absolutely no chance. So this is where the regulator is massively out, because again, the regulator needs to update, and all of that can now be punched out into public cloud.